Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. And I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Brendan, as well. More from Brendan later. To start, there's going to be a three-part webinar. I'm going to start with a short description of the fundamentals of third-party management. If you're interested in the longer version of this, we did a longer version a few months ago, and that is still available as a recording. So I'm going to spend about 20 minutes on talking about I call it third-party management, not just risk management, but management in general, including the risk management. And we'll talk about due diligence and contractual arrangements, kind of key things that are in the regulator's guidance. And then I'm going to pass over to Brendan for about another 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, and he'll talk about his experience in managing third parties using CalQRisk. And then for those of you who are still with us, and I hope you stay, I'll give you a short demo of that, about 15 minutes, so you can see what it actually looks like in practice. And we'll have time at the end for some Q&A. So let's have a look. First of all, who we are. As Fiona said, I know there's a lot of returning people here today. But for those of you who don't know us, we see ourselves as risk and compliance professionals, just like Brendan. And I'm sure Brendan would not put him on the spot, but would see us as equals, that we understand the business of risk management and compliance management. And we try to keep our skills sharp by being members of various organisations that you see here, the Institute of Risk Management, the Institute of Bankers, Compliance Officers of Ireland, etc., etc. So we try to keep on top of these subjects. And we, as many of you will know, we do a lot of these short webinars. Now, today is a bit longer because of the guest speaker and the demonstration, but generally our webinars are about half an hour, succinct and hopefully rich in material for you. We also make software, which I'm going to show you today, a governance risk and compliance solution called CalQRisk, the product CalQRisk. And our unique selling point used to be a knowledge base of risks and controls, but it's grown considerably since those days, and I'll give you a short description later. We have many users who are customers, and then many of their customers who are using the system. That's probably only showing half here. It's more like 4,000 if you include the customers of our customers, responders to questions, answering the due diligence questions. Okay. Why third-party management? Why would you manage third parties? Seems like a fairly obvious question and obvious answer. But yet many companies outsource to third parties and then I'd say almost forget about them. But you need to manage it, because something that is managed gets done, and if it's not managed, well, it's in the lap of the gods, you could say. Ensure you get the benefits, ensure you get the service, mitigate the risks. And when you outsource something, or when you rely on a third party for some part of what you're delivering, there are risks. And you can't assume. If you assume, then it'll come back and bite you. So you need to check. You need to manage it actively. By the way, the regulator says if you're in financial services, you have to as well. But you should do it anyway. You shouldn't have to wait for the regulator to tell you to do this. Your competitors, you can be sure your competitors are doing it and doing a good job of it. Now, due diligence, asking the right questions at the right time before the contract, even while you're in contract with them, is an important element of it. And I would see risk management as just the ongoing process of keeping it working, keeping it at the point where you're still reaping the benefits. Now, we say third parties for the most part, not outsourcing, not suppliers, not vendors, because it's all-inclusive term. And I know from discussions with people when they talk about the third parties, particularly, I suppose, critical third parties, oh, we've only got 2 or 3. I remember doing this a long time ago, trying to identify third parties. And when you start making the list, you'd be surprised how long it gets. I know in one credit union who thought they only had 2 or 3, by the time they'd finished counting, they had 17. But when I did it years ago, I actually went to the finance department and asked accounts payable people to give me a list of all our suppliers, all the people that we pay money to. And I was expecting 80 to 100 in this list. We were a big organization. 800 was on the list. Now, they're not all important, not all critical, but rather than start from a blank sheet of paper, get that list and you decide who are the ones you need to be watching. I've just got a sample here. I mean, we often forget the payroll supplier, because for a lot of us, it's done by a third party. The obvious ones are the IT service providers and maybe others like facilities management, whatever. Create your list and then tier into the groups of criticality, right? Rather than trying to say, well, who are our critical ones? Start with the full list, much easier, trust me. So now you've got your list of third parties that you're keen to manage well. I would further categorize them into the type. Are they an external service provider? Is it somebody intra-group? So you're a large organization and you have an operation in, we'll say, the UK that provides services to Ireland and to France and to Germany, and they're part of your parent organization. Central Bank is interested in this, and I would say you should be as well, because you may not have the leverage that you have with a totally independent third party. And you should understand, I suppose, what influence you have on your intragroup. So good to categorize them further by type. And I would say, are they just a vendor or supplier, or are they a service provider? Are they an agent? We have insurance brokers using the product, and they're using the third-party module to record all of their agents and the information around their agents. So it's not just outsourced service providers. Criticality, well, the European Banking Authority and the Central Bank and everybody would say you've got to identify your critical ones, part of the resilience theme as well. But it makes sense in a risk-based approach to anything that you identify who are the most critical, because they're the ones you need to get right first. Okay, so it's about prioritization. So do tier them, and you probably only need 2 or 3 tiers, the really critical ones, the next layer, and then the rest, if you wish. The regulator will want to know how you determine who's critical. So your methodology, and there are a few ways of doing this, but you might just have a think about, create a few questions. If this supplier failed, how would it affect us? Would it affect our customers? Would they be impacted fairly quickly, and how badly? Or badly, if it's badly, yes, then they're critical. You can ask a few questions like that if the answer is yes, you can say, okay, they're critical. I think, and the regulator doesn't say this specifically, but I think identify those that are data processors. Certainly the other regulator, the data protection regulator, would want you to be able to identify who else is processing the data that you are the controller for. And this is one from me, who has access to your network? Hopefully not many, because that opens a whole other can of worms. Now, due diligence. What is that? I suppose it's asking lots of questions of your third-party partner. Why? I think it's because you're always accountable. You're always responsible to your customers, to the regulator. And to assume, as we said earlier, to assume that the third party is doing what they should be doing is not good enough. Really, it's naive in a way but look, you got to check, you got to ask the questions, because if you don't ask them and later it turns out that it's not what you thought, the embarrassment is on you. You are responsible. The regulator says you have to do it as well. So look, the regulator generally only says the things that we all know in our heart are sensible things that we should be doing anyway in our business. They're setting a minimum standard is the way I always feel it. Now, you may have other opinions to say that we're over-regulated, but I think by and large they're setting a minimum bar, not a maximum. Transparency and accountability, you guys know this, and from many years with many of the scandals that have happened, the big thing now is transparency, and you got to be showing your stakeholders, your shareholders, and the regulator that you know your third parties, and you ask the questions, and it's fully transparent. You know what you're getting into when you sign that contract, and you continue to monitor it. You can't manage what you don't understand. I'll leave it at that. Okay. And if you needed other motivation, remember it's your brand and your reputation that's at stake here. And if your third party fails, your customers don't want to know your problems. Their contract is with you. Okay. So hopefully I've convinced you to do the due diligence. And how do you do it? Many of you are doing this, I'm sure, already. With the pandemic, I'd say in the final stretch, I like to think that we're coming out at the end of the tunnel on the other side, and we're beginning to feel confident enough. I'm in the office today, as you can see. We've got a nice new Zoom room, we call it, and so physical audits, hard to replace the physical audit. Go and see your third party. You will learn a lot just by walking about that organisation. But you can be efficient as well in gathering a lot of information by questionnaires, even maybe before the visit, that you have the answers to 100 questions, and the answers that may not be exactly as you expected, you can focus on them when you go and visit. But due diligence isn't just asking questions before you enter a contract. I think it's ongoing reporting, and I would call it mandatory reporting, that you're getting a report once a week, once a month, whatever is appropriate for your business. I remember being a supplier once to a large telecoms organisation in Ireland, and we did 5 reports every day. It was extraordinary, but it was mandatory, and it was showing our performance on a daily basis. We were a call centre. One that often isn't included, and I think this is an important one to consider, is the incidents. If you're measuring your own incidents, then you know the value of incident recording. It's that threat intelligence, if you use. It's telling you what's happening in reality, and do we need to improve the risk management? Do we need to improve the controls? Because if these incidents keep happening, something big is going to happen. I would be requiring of critical third parties that they fess up, if you wish, but that they report to you their incidents that could potentially affect you. It's all part of the transparency, and I would recommend it. Okay, and continuous monitoring. Well, that's part of, after the mandatory reporting, that you're constantly monitoring and maybe asking questions once a month, once a quarter, to make sure that the standard that you had set at the beginning of the contract is being maintained. If you require your third party to do pen tests, and I can say this because we just did a pen test 2 weeks ago, and we tell our customers we do a pen test every year, but you'll be quite within your rights to come and ask me, when was the last time you did a pen test, and can you tell us what the results were? We're happy to share, by the way, but ask your third parties. Okay. Contractual arrangements. This, if you don't have a contract with third party, okay, then I would say put one in place very soon. If you do have one in place and you don't have all of the things, and I've got another half a screen here to show you, then at the time of renewal, maybe update the contract. The language that I'm going to show you on this screen, look, it comes from the regulator, and I certainly have seen this for many years and have been involved in a lot of contracts. Read the regulator's guidance. I'm showing you a summary here, but it's key points. Your contract should show a clear description of the services to be provided. And that seems like an obvious thing, but I mean, that should be the core of the contract, isn't it? What are you getting for your money? Start date, end date, renewal date. I mean, is this an ad hoc contract, or is it something you're entering into for 1 year, for 3 years? And what opportunity do you have to get out of the contract? What are the exit terms and renewal terms? Maybe you have to renew 3 months before the end. This should be on a tracker somewhere. This should be certainly known to you. I think you'll find when you start recording this, and again, my own experience when I had to record details of 24 contracts in a previous life, half the information. So the very discipline of recording all of this, you'll find is very beneficial. In the contract, financial obligations for each party, obvious. Sub-outsourcing. Don't be silent on this. If you expect, or whether you expect it or not, have a discussion about if your third party outsources to a fourth party, their third party. You need to know about that because you are still responsible and accountable. So agree maybe how that should happen. Maybe you get informed and you get a chance to say, no, your choice. But be aware. Where will the service be provided? This is important to know, especially if you're dealing with personal data. Is the service being provided in Ireland, in the European Union, outside of the European Union? That obviously has an impact on the agreement and on controls you've put in place. Equally, where will the data be stored? Again, Ireland, EU, outside of the EU, your data protection officer will tell you the implications of that. And your information security requirements. Again, it seems obvious. You might assume that your third parties are as good as yours. Don't assume, ask, get confirmation. Reporting obligations, we spoke about it before. There should be some mandatory reporting that you get every week, every month, whatever frequency you need. And I would say at least a month, and maybe a quarterly business review. The service level agreements, whatever the service is being provided, there should be some expectation of the service level, and that should be in the agreement. Maybe it's a schedule in the agreement. It's good to retain the right to monitor and to audit that you can, and certainly the regulator will be looking for this. If it's a critical supplier, they will want you to have the right to go and inspect and audit. If they're a critical supplier, you're very concerned about their business continuity plans. Do they have them? Do they keep them up to date? Do they test them? All of this you should be asking and ensuring that it is as good as your own, or better maybe. Insurance cover required. Again, ask the question. If you're extending your operations through third parties, many third parties, what's the insurance cover? Is your insurance covering that activity, or are you relying on the third party to have appropriate insurance? Make sure that it doesn't fall between two stools. There's no right or wrong answer here, but certainly the agreement shouldn't be silent on it. It should be understood. Those clauses like hold harmless and liability, levels of liability, probably in most contracts should be. So you know who has covered what. Governing law. If there is an argument, if there is a dispute, where will it end up in court? Again, don't be silent. You hope an agreement never ends up in the courts, but it shouldn't be silent on it. And finally, termination rights and exit strategies. All contracts should have them in it. How do you terminate? How do you terminate with cause and without cause? And if it's with cause and you have to exit and you want to transfer it to another third party, tackle this up front. Put it in the agreement. If it's not in the agreement, it's difficult. And it's easier to put it in the agreement day one. And if it's not in the agreement, well, have it in your own plans as to how you get out. For speaking today, it's always interesting, well, for us and certainly for others, to hear, well, what do customers really think of the product? And thank you for that.
No worries, Jerry.
So thank you, and
thanks for having me.
Thank you for your attendance. Bye-bye.
All right, cheers, bye.